Good evening and welcome to the Town of Williston Development Review Board. Tonight is Tuesday, June 26, 2018. We have two items on the agenda for tonight. The first order of business is, as tradition has it, the public forum. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to bring an issue forth in the public forum segment of tonight's meeting? Hearing none, we will proceed directly into the first application, DP 17-29, Northern Holdings, Inc. requests a discretionary permit for their 5-lot residential subdivision. If the applicant would please come to the table, and when you're settled in, state your name and address, please, for the record.
Dennis Borble.
Your address, please.
Address?
Address.
4657 Lower Newton Road, Swanton, Vermont.
Thank you.
Eric Lovey, 1811 Pelots Point Road, North Hero, Vermont.
George McCain with McCain Consulting, 93 South Main Street in Waterbury, Vermont.
Good evening, gentlemen. Staff goes next.
All right. This is a request for discretionary permit review for a 5-lot subdivision located on the southeast corner of Sunset Hill Road and Old Creamery Road in the ARZD. The subject parcel is 12.4 acres. The proposed project would create 5 lots. 3 lots would be for single-family homes, and Lot 4 would be for duplex. And Lot 5 is the proposed 9.77 acres of permanently protected open space. As you may recall, this project came before the DRB for 2 pre-applications. Originally, it was reviewed as DP 1716 in February 2007. And at that time, the DRB did not recommend that the project be
2017.
2017, yes. It was DP 1716, and it was reviewed in February of 2017. And at that time, the DRB didn't recommend the project move forward to growth management allocation because there were concerns about the nature and extent of wetlands and seasonal flooding on the property. DRB reviewed the proposal a second time as DP 1729 on July 25th of 2017. At that time, the applicant provided additional information about the elevations of the homes and updated wetland information that was confirmed by with site visit by the state of Vermont wetlands scientist. At that time, the DRB did recommend that the project proceed to growth management allocation. So on March 27th of 2018, the DRB approved 4 units of residential growth management allocation for this development, and the parcel is allowed 1 additional unit by right. I'll just go over the pre-application recommendations and how the applicant has addressed those recommendations. So the first recommendation was to request 4 units of residential growth management allocation at the growth management hearing in March, which the applicant did and received 4 units of allocation at that hearing. Number 2, because this is a parcel of land 10.5 acres or greater, project's required to set aside a minimum of 75% of the area of the parent parcel as permanently protected open space. The 9.77 acres of proposed open space exceeds the minimum 75% requirement. 3, a habitat disturbance assessment must be submitted, and the applicant has submitted the HDA. Number 4 was 4, 5, and 6, and 7 were all recommendations put forth by the Conservation Commission. Number 4 states the westernmost building envelope off Sunset Hill Road, which is in Lot 1, should be cited so as to minimize impacts to the wildlife travel corridor. To further reduce impacts, the house on Lot 1 should be reconfigured so that it lies to the north of the driveway. The building envelope has been shifted to avoid impacts to the degree possible, understanding that there are constraints with elevations, and so I think the applicant did try to avoid impacts. The house on Lot 1 remains to the south of the driveway. At this time, I don't think the Conservation Commission has concerns about the house being to the south or the north of the driveway.
And what are you basing that statement on?
They basically, well, they didn't ask them to shift it back to the north of the driveway. They seem to accept the site plan and accept that there were constraints on the site that, Number 5, stated to maintain the existing hedgerows around the open meadows and along the road to the degree possible to provide wildlife habitat. And the applicants complied as indicated on the site plan and in the homeowners association declarations that were submitted as part of this application. 6, all wetland buffers shall be permanently marked on the ground as well as on the final plans. The applicant has marked the wetland buffers on the site plan and have indicated that they need to be marked on the ground. That's in the HOA declarations as well. And 7, the applicant should indicate on the site plan how stormwater impacts will be mitigated. The applicant has submitted an erosion prevention and sediment control plan, and in the HOA declarations, there is a statement that stormwater mitigation measures shall be maintained. And finally, 8, all comments are actually not quite, 8, all comments made by the Department of Public Works stated in their memo dated June 28th, 2017, shall also be adopted as pre-application recommendations, and the proposal complies with DPW requirements. And lastly, 9, all comments made by the Williston Fire Department shall also be adopted as pre-application recommendations. Although it is not indicated in their application materials, it is my understanding that the applicant is cooperating with the fire department to install some type of water storage system and dry hydrant on the property. So as far as the use goes, the proposed subdivision will be for the purpose of adding 4 new dwelling units to the parcel in addition to the 1 unit allowed by right. Single and 2-family dwelling units are an allowed use in the ARZD. 3 of the dwellings will be single family, and the remaining 2 are proposed in a duplex configuration. The applicant's proposing a subdivision which will result in 5 dwelling units on 12.4 acres of land, where the maximum allowed residential density in the zone is 1 dwelling unit per 80,000 square feet, or approximately 1.84 acres. The bylaw requires that lands with wetlands, wetland buffers, and slopes in excess of 30% be subtracted from the density calculation, and that lands with slopes between 15% and 29.9% be calculated at a reduced density of 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres. We have made an assessment of these constraints and have determined the subject parcel is constrained as follows, and I've included a table that show the acreage of wetlands and buffers, steep slopes, and unconstrained lands. There's a total of 10.19 acres of unconstrained lands, which allows for 5.54 allowable dwelling units, and then rounding down as required, The total, the maximum number of dwellings allowed on the parcel is 5. The applicant has proposed 5 units on the parcel. As a subdivision of land, 10.5 acres, 10.5 acres or greater, the project's required by the bylaw to set aside a minimum of 75% of the area of the parent parcel as permanently protected open space. The open space must include steep slopes, wetland areas, and buffers, and any other resources required to be protected under Chapter 27. The applicant's shown a proposed 9.77 acres of open space, and the open space includes all the wetlands and associated buffers, as well as the steep slopes. The proposed mechanism of protection is via designation and stated in the homeowners association declarations. For landscaping and setbacks, as stated in Chapter 31, the minimum property line setbacks in the ARZD are 50 feet from the road, town highway right-of-way. For the front setback, for the side and rear setbacks, 15 feet. The applicant's site plan has shown the building envelopes comply with the required setbacks. The bylaw, Chapter 23, has fairly loose requirements for landscaping in the ARZD, around residential developments in the ARZD. Says that buffers should be ample, but doesn't specify minimum widths. And in the ARZD, landscape buffers typically consist of open space, existing vegetation in the open space. But there's considerable discretion, the DRB has considerable discretion in determining what type of landscape buffers are appropriate in any particular context. Chapter 31 also provides some guidance regarding minimum distances between clusters of home sites, namely that clusters must be effectively separated from neighboring properties, public ways, and each other by open space. And the widths of buffers between clusters can vary with the terrain and the presence of screening vegetation, but that the DRB can recommend anywhere from 100 to 500 feet of buffers. So I guess there is, I guess it's questionable whether you can consider these clusters. There's one house on Sunset Hill Road, and then there's, two on, a cluster of 2 on Old Creamery Road, and then another, a duplex. So I'm considering those clusters of homes. Anyway, so it seems as if the existing vegetation generally provides ample buffers. The only thing that's a little bit questionable in my mind is the distance between the house on Sunset Hill Road, the lot on Sunset Hill Road, and the lot on immediately adjacent to it on Old Creamery Road. It seems like that might be a little bit sparse. So you might want to add a condition about supplementing the landscape buffer between those 2 home sites. I did not include a condition to that effect.
I seem to recall that that's an area that's pretty wet between those 2 proposed home sites.
Yeah.
And so it would have to be a type of vegetation that would withstand some pretty significant water, if I remember when we were looking at it, when this application first came forth to us. So given that, you would still recommend some type of vegetation?
I think that's really up to you.
Cottonwoods and weeping willows will deal with water.
Yeah.
I think since these are both going to be new homes that won't be, I mean, it seems like if one of those was already
Yeah.
existing and you were building one that close,
Right.
maybe screen it, but since they're both gonna be new,
Yeah,
it would behoove them to put in screening, or, you know, the value of the home would presumably go down. Would tend to defer to the applicant.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay.
okay. The applicant has proposed planting street trees along the public way on all 4 lots, and that, what they proposed is in conformance, appears to be in conformance with the bylaw, chapter 26 on street trees. For access, the applicants proposed 2 shared driveways, serving 2 units each on Old Creamery Road, and a single driveway serving the remaining unit on Sunset Hill Road. The Williston Development Bylaw encourages the use of shared driveways where feasible. The applicant will need to obtain an access permit for each driveway from the Williston Department of Public Works, and the driveways will need to meet Chapter 13 design standards, including perpendicular alignment, grade, site distance, and clearance from existing driveways and intersections. The DRB didn't request a traffic study at pre-application review, and staff notes that in Williston, 3 single-family units and 2 multifamily units would produce 4.59 PM peak hour trip ends. Permits for new single-family homes will have to be accompanied by impact fees, including traffic impact fees. For growth management, proposed development did receive the 4 units of residential growth management allocation on March 27th, 2018. The allocation is valid for 5 years, beginning on July 1st, 2018. Other boards did review the proposal. The police department had no comments. The fire department commented on the relative scarcity of water and supply for firefighting in this part of town, and requested that, recommended that the project include a water, 15,000 gallon water supply for firefighting. And Public Works noted that right-of-way permits are required. The culvert size and locations need approval by DPW, and as well as noting the regular compliance with their standards relating to utilities and driveways. The Public Works and Fire comments memos, Fire Department comments memos are attached to the staff report. The Williston Conservation Commission also reviewed the project, and their findings are attached. The Conservation Commission recommended that the recommendations of the HDA be followed to minimize impacts to wildlife habitat, basically to prohibit free roaming pets and limit the size of fenced areas, restrict tree cutting to the building envelopes, and as necessary to install infrastructure, cluster development as close to existing roadways as possible, use shared infrastructure like driveways, water, sewer, whenever possible, limit the amount and type of lighting used, immediately restore disturbed areas using conservation seed mix and mulch to avoid spreading invasive species. And then the other recommendations just about maintaining existing hedgerows to the degree possible, wetland buffers being permanently marked on the ground as well as on the final plans, and maintaining stormwater mitigation as indicated on the erosion prevention sediment control plan in the life of the project. Staff is recommending that the DRB approve this request for discretionary permit for a 5-lot residential development, and have included some findings of fact, conclusions, and conditions of approval for your consideration.
Thank you. It's your turn if you have anything to add.
That does a very good job summarizing most of what's going on there. The big thing I will say, the cooperation with the fire department, we actually do have a signed agreement with the fire department that we've just gotten, excuse me, just gotten taken care of. So we are actively cooperating with the fire department there. We're looking at utilizing the existing wet pond that's on site in the form of a dry hydrant to provide the fire protection flows. The only thing that's pending on that is having the Tina Heath, the state wetlands biologist, come back out to have a second look at everything, just because that's the standard steps we go through when we're proposing that kind of change in the wetland buffer. Other than that, the plan remains largely unchanged from what we proposed during the preliminary permit and the growth management piece. We've just provided some additional detail on how we're going to be taking care of additional things like water, wastewater, et cetera. We've got one shared leach field that's going to be a community system for all 5 units. There will be one easement across that open space for lot 1 to get over there. Excuse me. And each of the other houses are very close to that septic easement area. That will be the common lot. We are trying to utilize shared driveways where possible, so we've got the shared driveways for lots 1 and 2, as well as for the duplex unit. And the curb cuts and details that we provided on the site plans are meeting all of the Williston Public Works standards as far as the radius of the curves, the grading, the paved apron along both Sunset Hill Road and Old Creamery Road, and et cetera.
How close is the leach field to the area where the water can really run in that trough in there?
It's quite a ways away, actually. The main channel, this is our leach field here, the main channel runs way down here.
Okay.
At the furthest end of the property, so it does backfill up into here a little bit when the water really rises, but we've got it up at a very nice grade above there so that we're not concerned with flooding issues on the
Okay.
leach field.
Just curious. Oh, the other question was, how many wells are you sinking on that piece of property?
We are proposing 4, so there would be a shared well for the duplex, and then 1 for each individual lot, so they've got their own infrastructure to the extent possible.
4 wells on 10 acres, okay.
So the 2 that you're showing across the street on either side of Nob Hill Road,
Yes,
those are existing wells?
those are existing wells. We've dictated their isolation protection areas, so we've kept our leach field outside of that wellhead protection area for those wells so that we're not infringing on anyone's water protections with the new system.
I assume you've read all 13 proposed conditions of approval. Any concerns with any of the 13?
Nothing that jumped right out, no, I think. Everything seemed pretty straightforward.
Before I ask the board for more questions, do you have anything else to add at this point?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Now, this common leach field, is there going to be some kind of legal contract between all the owners in case the field, for any reason, dies?
There is, yes. In the Declaration of Covenants and Homeowner Association Agreement, there's stipulations for,
Okay.
I forget the exact terms, but any shared infrastructure, there's outlines on whether if it's shared by multiple units, everyone pays a piece. If it's your own, say your own individual septic tank, even though it feeds to the common leach field,
Okay.
you've got to repair your own tank.
And the replacement lines are called for in the plan. The replacement lines are gonna be installed right off when we build the system.
Okay.
So if the original lines fail, we just need to switch to the other lines. There'll be no.
Okay, so you're doing it like the floor heating in the bathrooms where you have the secondary wiring set. Okay.
Exactly.
Are the replacement lines shown on this plan?
They're actually interfingered with the primary trenches. So if you look at,
I think I'm seeing that
there's a
here.
little PR at the end of the trench.
Yes, that's what I thought I was seeing.
It's a little clearer if you take a look at the cross-section view on the second sheet. We've got them stepped 4 feet apart, so it's primary replacement, primary replacement. So that we'll only have 2 trenches of the 4 active to start with, and if that ever fails, we'll switch them over to the replacement area. And the nice thing about leach fields is if you give them 2 years inactive, you can switch it back,
They
and it'll
clean
work just again.
themselves.
Yeah, they eat themselves up, and it's brand new in a couple years.
Anything else, John?
Yeah, I'm a little confused on the tree line designation here. You appear to have it drawn at the line at 2 different scales and they cross each other. makes it confusing.
Yeah, so the tree line might have been a poor term here. What we've got, the existing tree line is the smaller, lighter piece.
Okay.
The darker bold is the proposed tree line, but really what we were trying to depict there was that the existing vegetation would remain once we got to the edge of the property line, so that the open space has the existing vegetation remaining.
Yeah, I mean, tree line, it is a little loose based on this little picture I see here, though. I assume this was in the winter when there's no leaves on the trees.
Correct, yeah.
So it makes it very difficult to see where the trees actually are.
We do have, let's see if there's, for this, it's a little zoomed out, so it's hard to tell from there, but you can see in here, we've got a pretty good cluster of trees coming in through here. There's a small open area somewhat in the middle, and then it fences back up and fills out what we're calling for the proposed leach field between these lots. So maintaining the vegetation will provide nice screening between lots 3 and 4, as well as from other projects behind it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Tree line is a little loose in some spots here. So is there any clear delineation of where you're cutting trees on here? Are you saying that within the building lots, you're gonna be cutting the trees?
Yes, we'll be cutting the trees within the building lots, as well as only what's required to install the leach field. You can see there's also that old proposed tree line around the edge of the leach field. We've got to clear that and maintain that area because we don't want any woody growth vegetation on top of the leach field. Right. It can reach down and crack the pipe, so we're basically in the leach field there, we'll only be cutting what's necessary for construction and then for maintaining the leach field itself. And then within the property lines, it will be basically within the building envelopes and property line to facilitate adding some fill to protect and raise some of the buildings up and just general construction since they're 6/10 of an acre or so lots in general.
So the HDA has recommended that you restrict the tree cutting to the building envelopes and as necessary to install infrastructure, and yet I heard you say that this line along the lot lines is indicating that you're going to be cutting everything up to that, and beyond that, you're going to leave the existing. So it's a little confusing as to where you're cutting and clearing the land. And, you know, which then leads into my next question, which is, how do you propose complying with the HDA recommendations here?
Our proposal with the compliance with the HDA recommendations was basically to leave everything on the open space as existing vegetation. We could potentially bring that tree line cutting back up to the edge of the building envelope. The only place it really differs are on the side and rear property lines setbacks, which is only 15 feet anyhow, so we didn't think it was.
The issue with limiting the tree clearing is that we are dealing with steep slopes and we will need to fill a lot of the area to get more gradual slopes. And if we leave the trees within the building lot, we would end up putting dirt over the roots and they would die in the future. And I'd rather remove them, and we are proposing to plant new street trees to recreate the buffer, because right now there's a lot of scrub trees there that aren't gonna ever really look like much.
I understand what you're saying. I'm still trying to figure out how that's in. I'm hearing you say one thing, but it's actually contrary to what I'm reading here, where it says restrict tree cutting to the building envelopes and is necessary to install infrastructure. And you're saying you're gonna cut those and because you have to
Yeah, I mean,
grade back in and.
on 3 sides, the building envelope is basically the building lot. On the rear and side, it's a 15-foot difference. On the front, those are going to be necessary to clear in order to get driveways in and
Okay, so I'm
install the
looking-
house, so we've got some.
I'm looking at lot 2, for example.
Yep.
You know, there, you've got the existing tree line kind of goes right into the proposed side of the proposed house, probably 80 or 90, probably 80 feet back from the road.
Correct.
So there's quite an area there that's kind of a difference between if you just limit it to the building envelope, or if you. I mean, you'd be cutting 50 feet between the road, if I'm reading this right. The trees go right up to the road there.
Yes, they do, and that's where we've got our landscaping plan, we're proposing to replant in that 50-foot buffer. Because I think we're providing the street trees along the front here to provide that screening and tree cover along the front of the lot. So that was the idea with those street trees, and we've got to pull them back far enough off the road that we're not interfering with the overhead power lines that are running through there. But that was our thought process with that, was to replant on the front edge of that building envelope that's going to have to be cleared as necessary to install infrastructure. But we're replacing those with trees for the for the WDB chapter. We've got the species and size and quantities on there.
Were these plans that we are looking at tonight are the exact plans that were reviewed by the HDA?
Yes, I believe we brought those along to the Conservation Commission.
I just want to make sure they were clear on what
Yep.
you were cutting, because it does.
Yes, no, that tree line and whatnot hasn't changed in the year, so we've been looking at bringing this one to the board.
What about the other conditions there, which I'm as much interested in this as anything else, but to prohibit free roaming pets and limit the size of fenced areas, are there bylaw covenants there that are going to do that, or?
I'd have to reread them, but I do know that there was something regarding the pets.
Yeah, I believe that was in the Declaration of Covenants. I'm just trying to
Yes.
find the exact verbiage as well.
I do recall seeing it.
And while you're doing that, I mean, the other question would be about the amount and type of lighting used. Are there restrictions there?
Is the lighting we've shown on the next sheet over with the our lighting plan? So lighting will be limited to, oh, I guess it's on the same landscaping and improvements, we combine those together. So we're going to have lighting at, above the garage, at a front man door and a rear man door or back patio. And all that lighting is called for on the site plans to be lantern style and recessed, downcast and shield.
And and is there anything to prevent homeowners from installing lots more lights after they move in?
Not other than they would be in non-conformance with the permit and therefore have to uninstall.
Yeah, but look at that bullet. Okay, this is just a really loose statement. Limit the amount and type of lighting used. I don't know how you limit a type. Or you just don't use the same fixture over and
That's what
over
we-
again?
I think by type, what we typically interpret that is the downcast and shielded, so you're not getting a floodlight or a raised vertical light up to a flagpole. Our type of light is downcast.
That's an interpretation.
That was my interpretation.
I do agree with you, Pete, that the HGA needs to be a little more specific when they write these for us to enforce.
So from my perspective, and I've made this statement before, when I chaired meetings, that bullet, as far as I'm concerned, we're gonna strike. Because it doesn't say anything that could be interpreted by a reasonable man. I don't know what that means.
That was my point. That's where I was headed.
So,
Same with bullet number 1. To what extent are we limiting the size of fenced areas?
right. So those, I can tell you that it's very likely those two bullets are gonna be struck in our final, finding.
Okay.
Yeah, unless they outrule us.
While we're on that section, I guess number three does say all wetland buffers will be permanently marked on the ground. Do you have thoughts on how that will?
Yeah, there's two common ways that we accomplish that. One option is, say, installing boulders or distinctive landscaping features, like a landscaping mound along that edge of that buffer. Another is a distinctive tree planting. So if you put say a sugar sugar maple or some kind of tree that wasn't necessarily common to the site, but if we planted those at 50 to 75-foot spacings or as needed to depict the boundary, those are all common ways that we've used to depict those kind of boundaries in the past.
The mound seems less preferable because it would restrict water from flowing.
In this
into the
case, it wouldn't probably work out. That was a different project. We had that one before, but that was more of a residential project where it was a common open mowed area, so it was a clear mound, so that the lawnmower couldn't get up over it to mow behind the mound. They had to keep on this side to keep from mowing. On this side, it would probably be boulders or trees or some kind of distinctive planting.
Donald Trump wall.
Or that, yeah.
8-foot chain link fence.
You can pick up the ones that they just elect not to use, and just put those in there.
So what have we used in the past? I mean, does it have to say this is a wetland, or is a boulder or trees acceptable?
Boulders and trees are typical delineating features.
There doesn't have to be a sign or anything that goes along with it, yeah.
Fences sometimes, like,
Fences deteriorate faster than boulders,
right.
Yes, they do.
and they need to be painted.
Anything else, John?
No,
Okay. Dave?
Can you point out where the dry hydrant, you said there's currently one out here that would be used?
No, we're currently working with the fire department to get one installed, so there's this class 3 wetland here is actually a pond.
Okay.
So where it's gonna be installed to, as you may know, the fire department can come in right now and just pop a hose in there and suck it dry and use it for fire flows, but there's the concern when it's iced over or inaccessible, to have that dry hydrant come out, and that's part of the reason getting Heath on site is to see where the state wetlands program would like to see that hydrant and where the fire department is there to see it, so get everybody on site to have their say and hash it out to see the best location.
So somewhere along Old Creamery, though, would likely be the.
Yeah, I met with them last week with the fire department, and they wanted it, or the site they were looking at, again, to be confirmed by the wetlands specialist, is, there's DeSarno Drive here. And then there's a culvert coming in this way and a culvert going this way, and so they want to put it right here. And then they would either put some kind of boulders or some kind of trees or something to show where the hydrant is itself.
The standard is they actually put a sign saying, fire department, no parking, dry hydrant.
Right.
They just put one in over in Shelburne, same thing.
The driveway across, almost directly across Knott Hill Road, that's an existing curb cut there?
Yeah, it's a field access, so it's like an old farm road, probably part of an old quarry operation.
That would just remain as is?
Yeah, we probably use that as a construction entrance for the leach field. But yeah, it's not provided for any permanent access to the site in the future.
And then I guess this is the EPSC sheet, the erosion prevention sheet. The landscape sheet does show there's the crosshatched areas that are labeled as existing trees and vegetation to remain, but it's only shown in the one corner and around the leach field. But that's not the intent, right? The intent is to maintain.
It is, yeah, we kind of put those in the vicinity of where the other cutting was going on so that it was clear what the intent to maintain was during construction. And then the open space would remain as existing vegetation.
So could it kind of imagine it being all
You
crosshatched
could, yeah.
outside of the building envelopes
Exactly.
and slope, and where you've got your slope, your fill lines? Okay.
So just for my clarification, so on the building lot, you're not gonna maintain or try to save the kind of the scrub brush along the road? And then, because what you're doing is you're clearing that out, building the house, and then you're putting in the new trees as delineated in the landscape plan.
Correct.
Is that a fair representation?
That's, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of saying that for everybody to, yeah.
Rather than putting in rocks, put in holly bushes. You can't kill them. And when you know, if they do start to impact on like your leach field and that, they're not a big deal to dig up and put a new one, you know, a young one back in its place. But that would be easier for the mowers to come in and say, everything north of the holly bush is what we're cutting.
I'll make that note.
Anything else, David?
I guess just, I think we'll need to modify condition number 13, which says, all comments made by the fire department will be adopted as a condition of approval. The fire department memo actually says you've got several options, and so we want to be more specific, presumably, right? And so the idea, there's no tank or cistern going in. You're going to be, I think we'll want to be a little bit more specific there, that in response to the fire department's comments.
Just what 13 should say is, the fire department will have the final say of what it's supposed to be, and as long as they're happy, then we're happy.
We're currently working.
We're not gonna
the applicant.
say the fire department has final say, because there's been some precedent where the fire department was asking for something that wasn't required by code. And so we're not gonna provide that much of
That much of a rubber stamp.
that much of a room, but you're on track with that. The spirit of this is that you reach an agreement with the fire department on how their concerns are gonna be addressed, and planning before issuance of a final building permit has a sign off from the fire department. That's what the spirit of that is, and you're heading in that direction.
This is a develop the water supply for rural fire protection landowner agreement signed by both the landowner and the fire department, if you'd like to see it.
So that's really where this is going. And so you're on track with that. Matt, you good with that? Okay.
How it's worded, I guess, is really
Yep.
up to the board.
Anything else, David? Courtney? Paul, anything else? John? Okay. Any other comments from the applicant?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you. You've done a very thorough job on this, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we're going to close DP 17-29. Oh, are there any comments from the audience? Good answer, Ben. On that note, we're going to close DP 17-29 at 7:50.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next up is DP 17-01, Black Rock Construction, requested discretionary permit to construct Northridge, 40-unit subdivision. I'm going to recuse myself, as is David, because we are Southridge residents, and I think I hand the gavel over to you, John.
Wherever you want, you're the chair. So, as always, we're gonna let staff go first.
Sure. You might want to get the applicant's name and address.
Thank you.
Benjamin Avery with Black Rock Construction, 68 Randall Street, South Burlington.
Okay. So just to orient the remainder of the board as to where we are, this is a request to submit a portion of the final plans for the Northridge subdivision. This is not a public hearing item. This is on your agenda as other business. When the Northridge discretionary permit was approved by the DRB retained, as staff advised, the final say over the signing of final plans. In the case of subdivisions of land, our council has also always stringently recommended that final plans and especially plats be signed by the DRB chair. Acting chair tonight was Pete Kelly, who's recused himself. Your normal chair, Scott Riley's not in in attendance tonight. So our procedure with this is to inform the board members who are remaining, which is a non-quorum number of the board. You need 4 for a quorum. You've got 3 sitting right now, of what the request is, obtain your advice, communicate that back to the chair who's not here tonight, and suggest that he follow your recommendation to us. So that's our procedural note for tonight. We're not in a public hearing. We're in the signing of final plans. This is an unusual request in that it's not a complete set of final plans. It's a partial element of the final plans that's intended to achieve a very specified goal as it relates to the progress of this development. And I'll get into that in a moment. Board members who were in attendance at our last DRB meeting 2 weeks ago know that we initially reviewed this request at that meeting, and that one of the things the sitting members at the time asked for was for the town's council to weigh in on the recommended action moving forward. So we've gotten that input, and I've attached it to what I've handed out in the form of an email correspondence between BlackRock's attorney and Joe Fallon, the town attorney, about the partial approval of the final plan here. So what's this request all about? This request is about a boundary line adjustment between a lot containing a single-family home and a piece of the Northridge parcel that will eventually become part of the road that goes from Metcalf Drive into Northridge. The lot we're talking about with the house on it currently has a driveway that runs parallel to that boundary line down to Metcalf Drive, and moving the boundary to make the lot that the road will go on big enough to put a road on per town standards will put that driveway too close to its side yard setback. In other words, we're moving the line closer to the driveway. It makes the driveway non-conforming. The remedy for that is to rotate the driveway 90 degrees and have that house access the new street that's proposed to be constructed. The challenge of doing that immediately is that the street's not there yet, because it has not been constructed and can't be constructed until the boundary line gets moved. So there's a timing element here where for some period of time, doing this causes a nonconformity. One remedy discussed by staff in the memo and at our last meeting is just file all of the final plans for the entire project as approved under discretionary permit. Obviously, that's a significant effort. It takes a significant amount of time, and it's not something applicants usually do until, if they're subject to it, until they've cleared other permitting processes like State Act 250 in this case. Staff's proposal and what was discussed and reviewed by the town council is that the DRB consider signing the plat for the boundary line adjustment to allow that neighboring property with the relocated or to be relocated driveway to be sold off. This is essentially taking that one little element of the project, looking at it the way we would look at it at a boundary line adjustment. If this came in all by itself and there was no Northridge and there was no road, staff would be able to approve this, or rather the zoning administrator would be able to approve this in the office administratively. Because it's connected to this larger project, we're proceeding with this greater degree of caution and treating it like it's a piece of the final plans for the Northridge subdivision, because it is. So that proposal remains, and what we've updated you with in this case is the correspondence between BlackRock's attorney, the applicant's attorney, and our attorney, who says something to the effect of, it's not in especially impenetrable legalese. As long as you satisfy the DRB, I do not think the select board cares about the driveway construction issue. And I would echo that, that we're the ones sort of picking the zoning compliance issue apart with a needle or fine-tooth comb. There is an involvement of the select board here related to who owns that right to develop that road and transferring that back and forth. The select board doesn't want to own it until it's constructed and completed. So there's a property transfer involved in this that's in their court, essentially.
Actually, the property has been transferred and the deed has been recorded. So we're now the deeded owner of both 749 Metcalf and the open space right-of-way lot. So the boundary line adjustment is between two parcels owned by the same entity.
The one question I was curious is, when you sell this property, because I'm assuming you're gonna sell this house to somebody, which is why this is being asked to,
Yeah, these poor folks moved in several months ago and they would love to close on their house.
okay, so the question is, when they get their deed, there's gonna be a note saying, at some point in time, your driveway's gonna turn 90 degrees, at some point, you're gonna connect to a new road, you know, and they signed all that, so they can't turn around and suddenly throw this all back into the mix, you know, and suddenly, you know, sue your organization, my point.
That is correct.
So that's all done, that's in their deed.
That's all done,
all,
and
yeah.
that deed was reviewed by the town attorney as well.
So in other words, we're back to really, this is an FYI to us, because of the fact that you said this would have all been done
Right.
without us really even being involved, other than to say, oh, by the way, this happened.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, in the end, is there a time frame in which you've promised to build that, even if Northridge does not proceed?
We had discussed with staff a term of 2 years. We felt that was ample time to move our project forward, even if we were to meet an obstacle and it were to take some time. We've also agreed that if the project does not move forward in that 2-year period, that we will, at our expense, shift the driveway to it'd be the west, however many feet we need to in order to bring the driveway into compliance. So that was something we discussed with staff, so that we weren't asking anybody to give us sort of an indeterminate amount of time for nonconformity. So we thought that was very fair.
And that language is in the language that's been, the documents that were reviewed by
Everything
the-
has been covered in the closing with and buyer's attorney has reviewed it, the lender has reviewed it.
So,
Any other questions? Your understanding of what the situation is?
So I guess what would be useful for staff at this point, it's not really a voting item, nor can you really vote on anything because you're not a quorum of the board, but from each of the three of you in attendance on this, do you have any advice for the staff? Should we request that the DRB chair come in and sign the plat to allow this boundary line adjustment to go forward?
That would be my recommendation.
Fine with that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have to close this hearing then?
We gotta stop.
It's not a hearing,
It's not a
so
hearing, so we don't.
you'd have to close it.
I think my only question is if the chair were to agree, then it would be tomorrow. I only ask because folks are trying to close on the house.
Sure, the chair is not in attendance tonight because he was out of town.
But is available.
I'll have to find out when he's going to be back in town.
Okay.
But what we typically do on signature on final plans items like this is inform the chair, yes, we've got the head nod to have you come in and sign it, and then once it gets signed, we walk it over to the clerk's office for recording.
Excellent.
So we'll keep you apprised of that.
Thank you very much.
So when are we gonna see you on the rest of this place?
Well, we're done and approved. I would imagine we'll be in for final plan barring any obstacles at Act 250. Probably, with any luck, in the fourth quarter.
Okay, cool.
So that would be, we have most of our sub permits in now, so working through it. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go into deliberative session now at 8:03. Welcome back to the Town of Williston Development and Review Board of Tuesday, June 26, 2018. We are coming out of deliberative session at 8:35. Do I have a motion for DP 17-29 Northern Holdings?
As authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, David Saladino, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of June 26, 2018, accept the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and conditions of approval proposed by staff for the review of DP 17-29 and approve this discretionary permit for a 5-lot residential subdivision with the following modifications. Condition of approval number 11 is modified to include at the end of the sentence, as revised by the Development Review Board below, and then reproducing the Conservation Commission's recommendations with the following modifications: striking bullet 1A, C, D, and E, modifying bullet 1B to state restrict tree cutting to the building lots within limits of disturbance as noted on EPS erosion prevention sediment control plan, maintaining bullet 1F and maintaining items 2, 3, and 4 from the recommendations. And then modifying condition number 13 to strike the word adopted and replace it with the word addressed, and to add condition number 14, which states erosion prevention and sediment control plan shall be revised to include defined limits of disturbance adjacent to the proposed sewer force main running from lot 1 to the proposed leach field. This approval authorizes the applicant to submit final plans, obtain approval of these plans from staff, and then seek an administrative permit for future development, which must proceed in strict conformance with the plans on which this approval is based.
Thank you, David. Is there a second?
Second. Oops.
Paul seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of June 12th, 2018?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of June 12, 2018 as written.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Courtney seconds it. Any further discussion?
I'm pretty sure I was absent, so I think just noting that I was not in attendance. I can't remember discussion of hot dog cart.
At the top on page 1.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
John, do you accept that friendly amendment?
I do, exactly.
Okay, Courtney, your second still stands?
My second still stands.
Any other further discussion? All those in favor to approve the minutes as amended? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:37?
I'll make that motion.
I guess before seconding, is there some staffing news to report?
Sure.
Oh,